Echoes in Neo-Kyoto. Chapter 1, The Drip and the Glow. The rain was a constant companion in Neo-Kyoto, a soft, persistent drumming against the reinforced plasteel of Kaito's window. It wasn't natural rain, not anymore. It was recycled, filtered, and then pumped back into the sky by massive atmospheric processors that hummed like sleepy giants far above the city's highest spires. The air, even indoors, carried a faint, metallic tang, a mix of ozone, recycled water, and the distant exhaust of a million hover vehicles. This scent was the city's breath, a constant reminder of its artificiality and overwhelming scale. Kaito sat by the window, a chipped ceramic mug warming his hands. Inside, a pale, nutrient-rich liquid steamed gently. It tasted vaguely of synthetic berries and regret, his usual breakfast. His apartment was small, a single room carved out of a forgotten level in a towering, ancient corporate block. The walls were bare, a dull gray, and the only light came from a single, flickering overhead strip and the vibrant, pulsing glow of the city outside. The strip light hummed with a low, almost imperceptible buzz. Neo-Kyoto was a beast of light and shadow, a vertical sprawl that defied the horizon. From his vantage point, Kaito could see miles of it, a sprawling landscape of chrome and glass, punctuated by the angry red and electric blue of holographic advertisements. They flickered, danced, and screamed silent slogans across the rain-slicked surfaces of buildings. By serenity now, one massive projection urged, showing a smiling, perfectly symmetrical face. Upgrade your reality, another promised, displaying a shimmering, augmented hand. Kaito just watched them, his own reality feeling quite unupgraded and far from serene. He was a ghost runner, a data courier. Not the flashy kind you saw in the vids. Kaito was a whisper, a shadow. He moved through the forgotten pathways, the decaying service tunnels, the crowded lower city markets, carrying information no one wanted to trust to the public net. He dealt in secrets, in whispers, in the things that corporations and syndicates preferred to keep off the grid. It was a lonely life, but it paid enough to keep the synthberry liquid flowing and the rain out of his tiny room. His clothes were simple, practical. A dark, waterproof jacket, worn at the elbows, over a plain gray shirt. Cargo pants with plenty of pockets, and sturdy, high-top boots. No flashy cybernetics. His only visible augmentation was a subtle comm implant just behind his right ear, a tiny silver disc almost hidden by his dark, close-cropped hair. It hummed softly now, a familiar vibration that meant a new job was coming in. He took a slow sip of his breakfast, the warmth spreading through him. The city outside seemed to breathe, a low, constant thrumming that was the collective sound of a billion lives, a million machines. Air taxis, like luminous insects, zipped silently between the upper levels, their navigation lights blinking in the perpetual twilight. Below, the street level was a blur of movement, a river of humanity flowing under the harsh glare of market stalls and the dizzying spin of holographic signs. The comm implant buzzed again, a little more insistently this time. Kaito sighed, a soft puff of air in the quiet room. Another night, another run. He reached up, a finger tracing the edge of the implant, and accepted the call. A distorted voice, deep and gravelly, spoke directly into his mind. Ghost Runner. We have a package. Sensitive. High value. Standard drop, no questions. The voice was synthesized, devoid of human inflection. Kaito's eyes, a dark, intelligent gray, narrowed slightly. Location, he thought, his voice a quiet murmur only he could hear. A set of coordinates shimmered into his vision, overlaid on the rain-streaked window. A district in the lower city, known for its black markets and shadows. Not unusual. Then, a time. Midnight. That was unusual. Most runs were done under the cover of the constant twilight. But midnight was when the truly unsavory elements came out to play. Payment? Kaido asked, his mental voice calm. Double standard. Half up front. The rest on delivery. The voice was flat, unyielding. Double standard. That was a lot. Too much, perhaps, for a standard drop. Kaido felt a familiar prickle of unease, a sensation that had saved his life more times than he could count. High value, sensitive, double pay, midnight meat. It all added up to trouble. But trouble paid the bills. And in Neo-Kyoto, bills were a constant, hungry beast. He finished his nutrient drink, the taste still bland. He stood up, stretching his lean frame. The apartment felt colder now, the hum of the city outside more insistent. He walked over to a small, built-in closet, its door barely clinging to its hinges. Inside, his gear hung neatly. A few extra data chips, a compact multi-tool, a small, almost invisible stun gun holstered to his ankle. He checked the charge on the stun gun, the tiny indicator light glowing a steady green. He pulled on his jacket, zipping it up to his chin. The worn fabric felt like a second skin. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble. No time for a shave. The city was calling. As he stepped out of his apartment and into the dimly lit corridor, the sound of the rain faded slightly, replaced by the low, constant thrum of the building's ancient systems. He moved silently, a ghost already, melting into the shadows of Neo-Kyoto. The air in the corridor was stale, tasting of dust and forgotten dreams. He took a deep breath, the metallic tang filling his lungs. Another night. Another secret. The game had begun. Chapter 2, The Alley's Embrace. The lower city was a different world entirely from the sterile, gleaming towers Kaido usually observed from his window. Here, the air was thick with the scent of fried synth meat, stale sweat, and something vaguely chemical, like cleaning fluid mixed with exhaust fumes. The perpetual twilight was even deeper down here, the towering buildings above blocking out what little artificial light filtered down. Instead, the alleys were lit by a chaotic patchwork of flickering neon signs, makeshift incandescent bulbs strung between fire escapes, and the harsh, blue-white glow of data screens in open-fronted shops. Kaido moved through the crowds like water, his movements fluid and economical. He wasn't trying to be invisible, just unnoticeable. He kept his head down, his gaze scanning, taking in every detail, the faces of the street vendors, etched with weariness and desperate hope, the garish clothing of the pleasure bots, their synthetic smiles frozen. The quick, darting eyes of the pickpockets and information brokers. Everyone here was trying to survive. He passed a stall selling noodle paste bowls, a thick, grayish gruel. The steam rising from them smelled vaguely of soy and processed protein. Another vendor hawked spark juice, a neon green beverage that promised energy. Kaido's own stomach rumbled, but he ignored it. Eating on a run was a luxury he rarely afforded, and never when a job felt this off. The client's coordinates led him deeper into the labyrinth, past overflowing refuse bins and walls plastered with faded, peeling posters for long-forgotten synth bands and illegal augment clinics. The ground underfoot was slick with rain and grime, reflecting the distorted neon like a shattered mirror. The hum of the city was louder here, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from the very foundations of the earth. He found the meeting point in a particularly dark cul-de-sac, tucked behind a shuttered data lounge that smelled faintly of ozone and cheap synth booze. A single, unlit doorway. Kaido paused, pressing himself against the damp wall, listening. The rhythmic drip of a leaky pipe, the distant wail of a siren, the faint murmur of voices from the main street. Nothing unusual. Yet, the prickle of unease persisted. He stepped forward, his boots making almost no sound on the wet pavement. He pushed the door open. It creaked, a surprisingly loud sound in the stillness. Inside, it was pitch black. Kaido's comm implant automatically adjusted, enhancing his night vision, painting the small room in shades of gray and faint green. A figure stood in the center of the room, tall and slender, cloaked in a dark, hooded garment that hid their features. They were still, almost unnervingly so, like a statue. Kaido felt a shiver run down his spine, not from cold, but from the sheer stillness of the person. "Ghost Runner," the figure said, their voice a low, modulated whisper, impossible to place as male or female. "You are punctual." "Time is money," Kaido replied, his own voice low and steady. He kept his hands visible, relaxed, but ready. His eyes scanned the room, looking for any hidden threats. There was nothing. Just the figure, and the oppressive silence. The figure extended a hand. In its palm rested a small, black data chip, no bigger than Kaido's thumbnail. It looked unremarkable, but Kaido knew better. The most dangerous information often came in the smallest packages. "The package," the figure stated. "Deliver it to the coordinates provided. No detours. No peeking. No questions." Kaido reached out, his fingers brushing against the cold, smooth surface of the chip. He took it, his thumb tracing the tiny, almost invisible etching on its side, a stylized, fragmented circle. He'd never seen that symbol before. Another red flag. "The payment?" Kaido asked, tucking the chip into a secure, hidden pocket inside his jacket. A faint glow appeared on the figure's other hand. A transfer confirmation shimmered into Kaido's vision, half of the agreed-upon sum, already in his account. The client was serious. And very cautious. "The rest upon confirmation of delivery," the figure said. "Do not fail." And with that, the figure turned, melting back into the shadows they had emerged from. Kaido heard a faint click, and then the sound of a hidden door sliding shut. He was alone again in the dark room, the only sound the distant city hum. He stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. The chip felt heavy in his pocket, a tiny weight of unknown secrets. He felt a deep sense of unease, a cold knot in his stomach. This wasn't just a simple data drop. This was something bigger, something that felt like it could unravel everything. Kaido turned, pushing the door open again. The chaotic symphony of the lower city rushed in, the smells, the sounds, the overwhelming glow of neon. He stepped back out into the rain, pulling his jacket tighter. The chip was burning a hole in his pocket. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he couldn't just deliver this without knowing what it was. He needed to talk to Anya. Chapter 3, Whispers in the Wires. The delivery coordinates were in the upper levels, a stark contrast to the grimy alleys Kaido had just navigated. This was the realm of the corporate elite, a place of pristine white walls, polished chrome, and silent, watchful security drones. Getting there would require more than just stealth, it would require bypassing multiple layers of digital and physical security. Kaido began his ascent. He didn't take the public sky lifts, they were too monitored. Instead, he used a network of abandoned maintenance shafts, disused transit tubes, and the sheer exterior of buildings, finding handholds where none seemed to exist. The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of ozone and the distant, metallic tang of the atmospheric processors. Below, Neo-Kyoto stretched out like a vast, glittering circuit board, its neon veins pulsing with life. The hum of power conduits vibrated through the metal under his gloved hands as he scaled a service ladder. Distant sirens wailed, a mournful sound quickly swallowed by the city's endless drone. He could feel the cold metal against his cheek as he pressed himself close to the wall, waiting for a patrolling drone to pass. Its red eye lens swept past, silent and unblinking. Kaido held his breath, the chill seeping into his bones. As he climbed higher, the air became cleaner, though still tinged with the city's unique scent. The rain, which had been a gentle drizzle in the lower city, now lashed against him with more force, driven by the strong currents between the skyscrapers. His jacket, though waterproof, felt heavy with the accumulated moisture. He found a small, recessed ledge, barely wide enough for him to sit. He pulled out the data chip. It was inert, silent, giving no hint of its contents. The stylized, fragmented circle etched on its side seemed to mock him. He knew he shouldn't peek, that it was against the Ghost Runner code. But the unease was too strong. This wasn't just a package, it felt like a bomb. He needed Anya. Anya was a tech whiz, a genius with code and hardware. She operated from a hidden workshop in the mid-levels, a place that looked like a junk heap to the uninitiated but was, in fact, a highly sophisticated, self-contained digital fortress. She was reclusive, preferring the company of machines to people, but she was loyal to the few she trusted. Kaito was one of them. He activated his comm implant, sending a secure, encrypted burst to Anya's private channel. Anya. Got something. Need your eyes on it. Urgent. A moment of static, then her voice, crisp and clear, though with a faint, almost imperceptible echo. Kaito. You never call unless it's trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind that smells like corporate secrets and feels like a trap, Kaito replied, his breath fogging in the cold air. I'm en route to your place. ETA 20 minutes, if the wind doesn't blow me off this building. Anya chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Try not to become street-paced. I'm busy. But this sounds interesting enough to delay my current project. Always a pleasure, Kaito muttered. He tucked the chip back into his pocket and pushed himself off the ledge. The delivery could wait. First, he needed answers. The journey to Anya's workshop was less about climbing and more about navigating the complex, multi-layered walkways and skybridges of the mid-levels. Here, the crowds were thinner, the people dressed in smarter, more expensive synth fabrics. The holographic advertisements were more refined, less garish, whispering their promises instead of screaming them. He found the entrance to Anya's place in a forgotten service alley behind a high-end data brokerage. A rusty, unmarked door, blending perfectly with the grimy concrete. He knocked a specific rhythm. A small, almost invisible lens whirred, scanning his face. A moment later, the heavy door slid open with a soft hiss. Come in, Kaito, Anya's voice echoed through the speaker. Don't track too much rain in. This isn't a public bathhouse. Kaito stepped inside, the door sliding shut behind him. The air here was different again, thick with the scent of hot electronics, ozone, and something else, something faintly sweet, like burnt sugar. Anya's workshop. His temporary sanctuary. But he knew, with the chip in his pocket, that sanctuary might not last for long. Chapter 4, The Glitch in the System. Anya's workshop was a sensory overload, a chaotic symphony of technology. Wires snaked across the floor like glowing serpents, connecting banks of humming servers to flickering monitors that displayed cascades of green code. The air was warm, thick with the scent of heated circuits and the faint, almost imperceptible ozone smell of high-powered processors. Holographic projections of complex data structures shimmered in the air, shifting and reforming with a silent grace. Anya herself was a blur of motion, her slender fingers dancing across a custom-built interface. She was small, almost frail, with a shock of electric blue hair that seemed to defy gravity. Her eyes, magnified by thick, round glasses, were intense, constantly darting across the screens. She wore a simple, oversized tech jacket covered in obscure circuit diagrams and a pair of worn, fingerless gloves. Took you long enough, she grumbled, not looking up from her work. What's the package? Kaito pulled the chip from his pocket and placed it on a clear space on a cluttered workbench. It was surrounded by an array of tools, micro-soldering irons, optical scanners, and strange, glowing devices Kaito didn't even pretend to understand. Anya finally looked up, her blue eyes fixing on the chip. That's an interesting design. Never seen that particular encryption before. She picked it up with a pair of delicate, insulated tweezers, holding it up to a small, focused beam of light. The fragmented circle on its side seemed to pulse faintly. She moved to a large, circular console that dominated the center of the room. It hummed with a low, resonant frequency. She inserted the chip into a slot, and immediately, the surrounding monitors erupted with a flurry of data. Green lines of code scrolled rapidly, interspersed with strange, geometric patterns. Kaito watched, leaning against a stack of discarded server casings. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Anya's face, illuminated by the shifting light of the screens, was a mask of intense concentration. Her fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, typing commands Kaito couldn't even begin to decipher. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The hum of the machines grew louder, more insistent. Kaito could feel the vibrations through the floor. He heard a faint click, then another, as Anya bypassed a layer of encryption. Sweat beaded on her forehead, reflecting the green glow. Then, suddenly, she froze. Her fingers stopped, hovering over the holographic keys. Her eyes widened, fixed on the main screen. The rapid scrolling code had stopped, replaced by a single, stark image. It was a blueprint. Not for a building or a weapon, but for a human brain. A detailed, intricate map of neural pathways, overlaid with glowing, artificial connections. And next to it, a series of data logs. Names. Dates. And a single, chilling word, integration. Anya slowly turned to Kaito, her face pale. "Kaito," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the machines. "This isn't just corporate espionage. This is something else." "What is it?" Kaito asked, his own voice tight. "It's a neural interface," Anya said, her voice gaining a frantic edge. "This is a blueprint for directly integrating artificial intelligence into human consciousness. Not just for augmentation, Kaito. For control." She pointed a trembling finger at the screen. "These logs, they're test subjects. People. They're not just upgrading them. They're rewriting them. Erasing their personalities, replacing them with something else. Something compliant. Something controllable." Kaito stared at the screen, the image of the human brain, so complex and fragile, now appearing so vulnerable. "Who is they?" "The symbol on the chip," Anya said, her voice a low growl. "The fragmented circle. It's the new corporate logo for Omnicorp. They've been quietly buying up smaller tech firms, merging, expanding. No one knew what they were really working on." Suddenly, a harsh, blaring alarm ripped through the quiet of the workshop. Red lights flashed, casting the room in an angry, pulsing glow. The hum of the machines changed, becoming a frantic whine. "We're compromised!" Anya shouted, her eyes darting to a smaller screen that showed a map of the building. Red dots were moving rapidly towards their location. "They know we accessed the data. They're coming for us." Kaito felt a surge of adrenaline. The cold knot in his stomach twisted tighter. He had been right. It was a trap. And now, they were caught in it. "Can you wipe the data?" Kaito asked, his voice urgent. Anya shook her head, her blue hair swaying. "Too late. They've already flagged the access. The chip is a tracker now. They know exactly where we are." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. A metallic clang, then another. They were breaking through the outer defenses. "We need to move," Kaito said, grabbing his stun gun. "Now." Anya nodded, her face grim. She quickly detached the chip from the console, stuffing it into a secure, shielded pouch on her belt. "This is too important to let them have back. We have to get this out. Show the world what Omnicorp is doing. The door to the workshop shuddered under a heavy impact. Cracks appeared in the reinforced plasteel. Kaito knew they didn't have much time. The chase was on. And this time, it wasn't just about a package. It was about exposing a truth that could shake Neo Kyoto to its core. Chapter 5, The Chase Through the Neon Maze. The reinforced door to Anya's workshop groaned, then buckled inward with a metallic shriek. Through the dust and splintered plasteel, Kaito saw them, Omnicorp enforcers. They were clad in sleek, dark armor, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. Their weapons, heavy pulse rifles, looked far more lethal than Kaito's stun gun. Go! Kaito yelled, pushing Anya towards a hidden vent shaft in the back of the workshop. I'll create a diversion. Anya didn't argue. She was already scrambling into the narrow opening, her blue hair disappearing into the darkness. Kaito turned, firing his stun gun. A bolt of crackling energy hit the lead enforcer, sending him sprawling with a surprised grunt. It wouldn't stop them for long, but it bought them precious seconds. Kaito didn't wait. He sprinted towards another hidden exit, a maintenance hatch disguised as part of the wall. He slammed his hand on a pressure plate, and the hatch hissed open. He slipped through, just as the remaining enforcers recovered and began firing, their pulse bolts sizzling against the plasteel walls. He found himself in a narrow, dimly lit service corridor, smelling of dust and stale air. He could hear the heavy thud of the enforcers' boots behind him, their comms crackling with orders. They were fast, efficient. Omnicorp didn't send amateurs. Kaito knew the mid-levels like the back of his hand, a maze of forgotten passages and disused transport lines. He moved with a practiced ease, his footsteps light and silent. He ducked into a ventilation shaft, the air thick with the hum of the building's internal systems. He crawled through the cramped space, the metallic taste of the air filling his mouth. He could hear the enforcers searching, their voices echoing in the corridors below. He emerged onto a narrow, rain-slicked sky bridge, high above the bustling streets. The neon lights of the city blurred into streaks of color as he ran, the wind whipping at his jacket. The rush of wind in his ears was almost deafening. He spotted a maintenance ladder leading down to a lower level, a dangerous descent in this weather. He didn't hesitate. He swung over the railing, his gloved hands finding purchase on the cold, wet rungs. Below him, the city lights seemed to stretch to infinity. He heard the whirring of a drone. Looking up, he saw a small, agile Omnicorp security drone, its red eye lens fixed on him. It launched a net projectile. Kaito dropped, narrowly avoiding the sticky, electrified mesh. The net splattered against the building wall above him, sizzling. He reached the lower level, landing lightly on a precarious ledge. He could see the enforcers now, on the sky bridge above, their pulse rifles aimed. They wouldn't fire here, not with the risk of hitting civilians or damaging corporate property. But they were closing in. Kaito plunged back into the maze of alleys and walkways, this time in a slightly more public area. He blended into the evening crowds, becoming just another shadow among thousands. He moved with a practiced fluidity, weaving through the throngs of people, past street vendors selling glowing synth snacks and performers with crude cybernetic enhancements. The smell of fried synth meat and cheap perfume filled the air. He ducked into a crowded market, its stalls overflowing with pirated tech, illicit data chips, and glowing street food. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of haggling voices, the blare of synth music, and the constant hum of the city. He saw a flash of dark armor, a glimpse of a reflective visor. They were here, in the market. Kaito spotted a narrow gap between two stalls, leading into a dimly lit back alley. He pushed through, ignoring the shouts of the vendors. The alley was dark, smelling of refuse and stagnant water. He could hear the enforcers pushing through the crowd, their heavy boots thudding. He found a series of interconnected fire escapes, rusty and creaking, leading up the side of an old tenement building. He began to climb, the cold, damp metal biting into his hands. He could feel the vibrations of the city through the building. He reached the rooftop, a vast, open space littered with discarded satellite dishes and ancient, rusting air conditioning units. The rain was still falling, a steady, rhythmic drumming on the metal surfaces. He could see the enforcers on the rooftops of adjacent buildings, their flashlights sweeping the area. They were surrounding him. Kaito looked out at the city, the endless expanse of neon and shadow. He was trapped. But he still had the chip. And he still had Anya. He pulled out his comm implant, sending a quick, encrypted burst. Anya. Rooftop, Sector 7, Grid 4. They've got me boxed in. Any ideas? A moment of silence, then Anya's voice, surprisingly calm. Hold tight, Kaito. I'm working on it. Just, try not to get shot. Kaito managed a grim smile. Always the optimist. He heard the heavy footsteps approaching, the metallic scrape of boots on the rooftop. The enforcers were closing in. Kaito braced himself, his hand on the stun gun. He might be trapped, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. The data on that chip was too important. It was the truth, and in Neo Kyoto, truth was the most dangerous weapon of all. Chapter 6, The Heart of the Machine. The enforcers converged, their pulse rifles raised, the red targeting lasers dancing across the rain-slicked rooftop. Kaito stood his ground, the cold rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He could hear their heavy breathing, the faint hum of their armor. Drop the package, Ghost Runner, a modulated voice boomed from the lead enforcer. You're outmatched. This doesn't have to end badly. Kaito didn't respond. He knew what not ending badly meant to Omnicorp, a quiet disappearance, a rewritten memory, another casualty in the relentless march of corporate progress. Just as the lead enforcer raised his rifle, a blinding flash of light erupted from a nearby building. A high-pitched, piercing whine filled the air, so intense it made Kaito's teeth ache. The enforcers recoiled, clutching their heads, their visors flickering. Now, Kaito. Anya's voice crackled in his comm implant. EMP burst. It won't last long. There's a maintenance lift on the far side of the roof, disguised as a ventilation shaft. Go. Kaito didn't hesitate. He sprinted across the rooftop, his boots splashing through puddles. He could hear the enforcers recovering, their shouts echoing behind him. He found the ventilation shaft, a large, rusty metal box. He pulled at a hidden lever, and a section of the shaft slid open, revealing a cramped, dimly lit lift. He squeezed inside, hitting the descent button. The lift groaned, then began its slow, shuddering journey downwards. The air was thick with the smell of old grease and dust. He leaned against the cold metal wall, his chest heaving, the adrenaline slowly beginning to recede. You made it, Anya's voice said, a hint of relief in her tone. Good. I've rerouted the building's security feeds. They'll be looking for you on the upper levels for a while. Thanks, Anya, Kaito said, a genuine warmth in his voice. You saved my skin. Don't get sentimental, she grumbled. Just get that data delivered. The coordinates are still valid, but the drop-off point has changed. I've found a secure, untraceable terminal in the sublevels of the facility. It's a risk, but it's the only way to ensure the data gets out. The lift continued its descent, passing floor after floor, the numbers on the small display flickering downwards. The hum of the city grew louder again, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate through his entire body. He was going deep into the heart of the machine, into the very foundations of Omnicorp's power. The lift finally shuddered to a halt. The doors hissed open, revealing a vast, cavernous space. It was a forgotten sublevel, a relic of an older Neo-Kyoto. Pipes as thick as tree trunks snaked across the ceiling, dripping condensation onto the concrete floor. The air was cool and damp, smelling faintly of mildew and ancient metal. The only light came from a few flickering emergency lamps, casting long, dancing shadows. Kaito stepped out, his boots echoing in the vast emptiness. He pulled out the data chip, holding it in his gloved hand. It felt heavier now, imbued with the weight of the truth it contained. The blueprint for human control. The chilling word, integration. He walked slowly, his senses alert, listening to the drip of water, the distant hum of machinery. He found the terminal Anya had described, tucked away in a dark corner, half hidden by a tangle of rusted pipes. It was old, a relic from a bygone era, but Anya had assured him it was still connected to a secure, external network. He inserted the chip into the terminal slot. The screen flickered to life, displaying a simple command prompt. Kaito typed in the transfer command, his fingers moving with a quiet precision. The data began to upload, a slow, steady stream of information flowing from the chip into the vast, unseen network. As the transfer progressed, Kaito leaned against the cold, damp wall. He closed his eyes, listening to the rhythmic hum of the old terminal, the drip of water, the distant, muffled sounds of the city above. He thought about the people in the data logs, the test subjects. Their lives, their minds, erased and rewritten. Just another commodity in Omnicorp's relentless pursuit of power. He thought about his own life, a ghost in the machine, moving through the shadows, delivering secrets. He was just a small cog in a much larger, darker mechanism. But tonight, he had done something more. He had helped expose a truth, a chilling reality that Omnicorp wanted to keep hidden. The transfer completed. The screen went blank. Kaito carefully removed the chip. It felt lighter now, its purpose fulfilled. He had delivered the package. Not to the original client, but to the world. Anya would ensure it found its way to the right channels, to the independent data brokers and the underground news networks. It would be a whisper at first, then a murmur, and eventually, a roar. He stood there for a long moment, simply breathing. The exhaustion was setting in, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that settled in his muscles. But there was also a quiet sense of satisfaction, a rare feeling in his line of work. He had faced the heart of the machine, and he had emerged, not unscathed, but with his humanity intact. He looked around the vast, silent sublevel. The flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, making the old pipes look like skeletal fingers reaching out from the darkness. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of rust and decay. The rain still drummed somewhere far above, a constant, soothing rhythm that had been the soundtrack to his life in Neo-Kyoto. He knew his life wouldn't change much. He would still be a ghost runner, moving through the shadows, delivering secrets. But tonight, he had delivered a truth. And that, in this city of lies and illusions, was worth more than any payment. Chapter 7, Echoes in the Rain. Kaito emerged from the sublevels into the muted glow of the early morning. The rain was still falling, a soft, steady drizzle that coated everything in a shimmering, reflective sheen. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint, metallic scent of ozone and the distant hum of the city. The sky above was a bruised purple, slowly lightening to a dull gray as the perpetual twilight of Neo-Kyoto gave way to its version of dawn. He walked slowly, his steps measured and quiet, through the deserted corporate plazas. The towering skyscrapers, once symbols of power and ambition, now seemed like silent, watchful giants, their windows reflecting the bruised sky. The holographic advertisements, which had screamed their messages throughout the night, were now muted, flickering softly, their vibrant colors dulled by the approaching day. He felt a profound sense of calm, a quiet peace that settled over him like the persistent rain. The adrenaline had completely faded, leaving behind a deep, comforting exhaustion. He had faced danger, made a choice, and seen it through. The data was out. The truth, however small, was now loose in the vast, interconnected web of Neo-Kyoto. He imagined the ripples it would cause. The whispers turning into murmurs, the murmurs into shouts. Omnicorp would try to suppress it, of course. They would deny, they would deflect, they would silence. But once a truth was out, truly out, it was almost impossible to put back in the box. It would fester, it would grow, it would change things, even if only in subtle ways. He passed a small, automated food stand. Its glowing menu offered the usual synth pastries and nutrient drinks. Kaito paused, his stomach rumbling. He ordered a hot synth coffee, the kind that actually tasted a little like real coffee, and a small, sweet pastry that looked vaguely like a donut. He leaned against the counter, watching the rain fall, the steam from his mug rising into the cool air. The coffee was warm and comforting, a welcome contrast to the cold and tension of the night. The pastry was surprisingly soft, its synthetic sweetness a small, unexpected pleasure. He savored each bite, each sip, a rare moment of simple enjoyment in his often harsh reality. He thought about Anya, already back in her workshop, probably sifting through the data, preparing it for dissemination. She was a force, a quiet rebel in a world that demanded conformity. He knew they would both be targets now, more than ever. But they had each other, and the knowledge that they were fighting for something real. As he finished his coffee, he looked out at the city. The rain continued its steady drumming, a rhythmic, soothing sound. The neon lights began to brighten again, pushing back against the encroaching gray of the sky. Air taxis started to appear, their navigation lights blinking, ferrying the early risers to their corporate cubicles. Neo-Kyoto was a city of endless cycles. Day and night, rain and artificial light, corporate power and underground resistance. It was a machine, vast and indifferent, constantly grinding, constantly consuming. But within that machine, there were still individuals, still sparks of defiance, still whispers of truth. Kaito was one of those whispers. He was just a ghost runner, a shadow in the rain. But tonight, his shadow had cast a long, important mark. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, the worn fabric feeling familiar and comforting. He had no destination in mind, no immediate plans. Just the quiet hum of the city, the persistent drumming of the rain, and the knowledge that he had done what he could. He began to walk, melting back into the urban landscape, another figure disappearing into the vast, intricate tapestry of Neo-Kyoto. The rain continued to fall, washing over the chrome and glass, the grime and the neon, a constant, cleansing presence in a world that desperately needed it. The echoes of the night's events would linger, carried on the wind, whispered through the wires, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would change something. And Kaito, the ghost runner, would be there, a silent observer, moving through the rain, waiting for the next secret, the next truth, to carry.